Welcome to The Hero Maker. In this series, we follow Richard's appearances on other shows as he talks about how to grow, play, think, and live like a hero. Join him as he discusses thoughts, principles, and life lessons, all essential for anyone building their heroic brand. All that and more, only on The Hero Maker.
I also want to talk about your podcast, The Hero Show. What is it about, and what can we get from that?
So The Hero Show is it's sort of a pet project of mine that has a fun story unto itself, right? So for me, one of the things that I've always hated about our culture is that our culture regularly vilifies entrepreneurs, right? And you can probably remember back to the cartoons you used to watch as a kid, and like now my kids watch cartoons all the time. You always see like the bad guy is always some entrepreneur, right? And he's always like dumping oil in the oceans and killing the ducks or some variation thereof. And so we grow up with our movies, our TV shows, our stories, the culture that we're shown is that entrepreneurs are villains. And so when we get into being entrepreneurs, you see a lot in the entrepreneur space that people who are building their business or just starting, they struggle with things like asking for money or making a profit or, any of the things that go into actually building a business. And you're like, hey, I don't want to, one of the things I struggle with is like, I don't want to have a job. So if I offer someone else a job, am I enslaving them to something they don't want to have, right? Not realizing that not everyone has the risk tolerance or desire to be an entrepreneur like I do, right? So there's a lot of these things about being an entrepreneur that fears and things that we struggle with that come from this cultural idea that entrepreneurs are villains. And that's always bothered me. So a number of years ago, I set out to how can I change that narrative, right? How can I have an impact on that narrative? And that's where the Hero Show was born. And the motto essentially is that, we have lots of people in our world we consider heroes, right? Like doctors and military veterans and police officers and firefighters, and they're rightly called heroes. But the heroes that are most often overlooked are the entrepreneurs. Because literally everything in your life that you interact with on a daily basis was at some point touched and influenced by an entrepreneur, right? Your life wouldn't exist the way that it does now if it wasn't for entrepreneurs, right? They're the, like Atlas Shrugged, they're the entrepreneurs are what hold the world up and make it go around. And without them, we wouldn't have the blessings that we have today. So the message of the Hero Show is that entrepreneurs are heroes. And all we do is we invite other entrepreneurs on from all walks of life, from just starting their businesses to I've had Silicon Valley tech startup CEOs and people who started their business and 18 months later were doing $60 million in app development stuff, really cool businesses from all over the place, all over the world. I think we're actually interviewing a coffee shop owner in the Philippines this next week, which is really cool. And we've had portrait and videographers from Ukraine and people from all over the US and all walks of life sharing their story, and we just look at their story through the lens of a comic book superhero. What are their superpowers? What is their defining characteristics and their fatal flaws and stuff like that. And we go through that in a fun interview style. And so far, we're about 100 episodes in. We just recorded our 100th episode yesterday, I think, which is super exciting. And so far, every one of my guests has really loved the framework and really loved thinking through their own story as if they were a superhero. So that podcast is it's really designed for my guests. I hope my listeners love it, but it's really designed to make my guests feel like superheroes. And that podcast for me, I started it, I got my first 8 episodes done and realized that it was a royal pain in the ass to do all of the post-production work and get them published and everything. That's where the Push Button Podcast service was built. So I actually started hiring staff and we built out a whole system because I didn't want to do anything other than show up for the interviews. So now for my podcast, I literally don't do anything. My staff does all the booking of guests and they handle all that, research and booking and all that. I show up for the interviews. When I stop record, it gets sent to my team and they do the editing and the audio editing and they do the graphic design and they do the writing and the research and all the stuff that goes into that. And they get all the graphics done for all the social media stuff. They publish everywhere, announce it everywhere. And we turn that into a turnkey system that we now offer to other podcasters because I realized I wasn't the only one that suffers from that. And that's where Push Button Podcast service was born. So it was not something I intended for that show, but the show has actually turned into another revenue generator for us because of the Push Button Podcast service that came out of it.
If you want to hear the rest of this discussion, please check out the link to the full episode in the description below.